getting a bit confusing sometimes filming stuff about the Coventry Climax engine and stuff about the Riley and keeping the two separate. I need to think about what I talk about. But I've been playing around with my ultrasonic cleaner and various other cleaning things to figure out the best way to actually clean up some of these parts. So this is the fuel pump from the engine and this is the carburetor. And what I've actually discovered works best for me is to degrease parts. I use just water and a couple of tablespoons of washing soda, calcium carbonate, and a couple of drops of washing up liquid. I don't think it matters what washing up liquid you use. I've used both the palm olive and the sunlight. I just buy whatever's cheapest. And that gives you a good alkaline type solution, and that cuts through all the oil and grease and muck on the parts. So I usually give them an hour or so in the ultrasonic with that, give them a clean off in hot soapy water to get rid of all the alkaline stuff. And then what I've actually found works quite well, and I found this out by accident, was on this piece. This is steel, these linkages. So I ended up getting all the grease and crap off them, and I put that into my evaporust. I've got a bucket of evaporust here overnight and left it in there for a couple of days, and that definitely takes the rust off all the steel parts like the nuts and bolts and the springs, and it doesn't affect the casting, but I found it actually makes it cleaner. And I think it might be because it's very slightly acidic, but it leaves the parts with a sort of dull grey finish. You can sort of see that on the inside there, but you can easily clean that off with a brush, or I've been using a grey scotch pad, and just a quick rub of that and it comes up really clean. So that works pretty well. The problem I have on this is the fuel pump. I think I can rebuild. You can get rebuild kits for that. They seem pretty standard. The float was holed, so I had to punch a couple of little holes in it, drill a couple of little holes, get the fluid out and then resolder it. That should be fixed now. Obviously the diaphragm is shot, that's completely gone, so that wasn't going to work. I don't think I'm going to need the priming lever because that was all broken on this. There's a little metal lever, that's part of it. That was part of the, whoops, the little thing that retains it. But this is hand cranked, this engine, so I think if you turn the hand crank a couple of times with the ignition off, that'll be enough to prime the fuel. And I'm only going from that little tank which is above the pump, so I think it'll self-prime anyway. The bigger problem is the carburetor. The top of it's okay. So according to the specs, and it's actually marked on the carburetor, it's got ASM there, which is the engine type, and 16U, which is the type of carb. It's a Zenith carburetor. This is the choke part, and you can see how the pot metal is just coming apart. This is what it does over time. It just falls apart. So I don't know how much life this has got left in it. I'm going to repair this with some JB weld to fill in those holes. You can see it's already got other pieces that are starting to break off. I did chip one piece off just to see how brittle it was up here, and it came off pretty easily. The float bowl is starting to get that as well. You can see it starts sort of cratering almost, or pushing up from the inside. It all just comes apart. I actually had this problem on my lathe. This block here is the same thing. It's just this kind of muck metal, this bearing block for the end of the lead screw, and I just ended up covering it with epoxy, which seems to have done the trick on that one for now. So I think JB weld will work for now. The problem is this carburetor, this 16U Zenith, I can't find out anything about it. So I've cleaned it all up. It's very simple. There is a simple jet which goes in here, and there's various passages that connect, but that jet basically goes down into this one here, and the fuel float goes in like this, and the fuel valve is at the top here. That seems to work. That's one piece. I took all that apart and cleaned it. And that's really all there is to it. There's almost nothing there. It's just straight Venturi. And I think that is why the throat on this is so tiny. I'm guessing it's to get the airflow up through the carb so that it can actually suck the fuel up. That would be my guess anyway. So what I'll do is I'll put this back together. There's no seals in it really. There was a copper washer. I think that was the only one. I'll put it back together. It's just a bunch of drillings and plugs, and I can use compressed air. I'll fill it up with something like methylated spirits and then blow compressed air through it and see if it sucks the fuel through. But other than that, I don't know where I would get a replacement one of these. I don't think you can even get parts. So if that doesn't work, I'd have to adapt it to a different sort of carburetor probably. Out in the shed again, and I'm working on the Coventry Climax engine. I asked one of the local suppliers. They did have a rebuild kit for this Y-type pump on their website, and I checked with them, and unfortunately they didn't actually have the Y. They had the YD, which is a slightly later one, and it's got different valve setup. So it looks like the only way I'm going to get one of these is from the UK, and it turns out the place that sells them is the Vintage Automobilist, which is the same place I bought all of this stuff from just the other week. So if I'd known I needed that kit from them, I could have got it included with that and saved some postage. But it looks like I'm going to have to do another order to get the rebuild kit. I managed to lose one of the little brass springs, which does come in the kit, but I lifted a piece out of here and the spring dropped out and went somewhere. And of course, things like that, once you drop them, they're gone. So I have no idea where that's gone. It might have gone into this one. No, it probably pinged off somewhere. It being so tiny, I didn't even hear it. Normally you can hear those things and you hear them go flying off, but no, I think that's lost. So that does come in the kit, luckily, so I should be able to get one of those soon. I think it's about £30 for that kit, plus whatever the postage is going to be. I have reassembled the carburetor, and last night I used JB Weld to cover over the worst of the zinc rot. So that's what's going on here. So this is like a zinc, I think it's Zamac, special sort of zinc they used for die casting back in the day. And apparently the early stuff, so stuff from the 20s and 30s, was prone to what they call zinc rot, which is where that zinc is actually disappearing, corroding away, and it just goes all crackly like that. So that's what you can see there. So I don't know how strong this is going to be or if it's going to hold up, but I filled all the holes with JB Weld and sanded it down a bit, given it all a good clean. You can see the fuel bowl is suffering as well. I've put it back together. The needle valve definitely works. You can test that pretty easily by blowing air through it and turning it upside down. And I have filled it with, I tried water as well as methylated spirits. I filled this up and I used my vacuum cleaner to blow air into there to see if I could see anything coming up through here, but I couldn't. So I don't know if this is going to work or not. I have looked for these carbs online. So this is a Zenith type 16U, and then they call them special, and they do seem to be special because I haven't even been able to find photos of this online, let alone anyone with parts on them or information about them. So they maybe were only ever used on that one little engine. If this doesn't work, I guess one of the options I've been looking at is tractor carbs, vintage tractors. There's a particular type which you can get cheap from China, which should probably do the job. Or I've got a box full of SU carbs, and bits, so I could dig out one of those and try and put something together there. I would have to sort of make a manifold to mount it down here, and could that be rotated? No, it's bolted. And then somehow set up the air piping to go through the filter. That shouldn't be too hard to do. The distributor, I'm still kind of looking at that. If I want to get a distributor cap and a rotor for this, the cap here is $60, the rotor is another $30. I can actually get an entire, it's not a 25D, it's, I can't remember the number on it. It's like the 25D, but without the vacuum advance. And I could get one of those complete distributor, brand new replica for, I think it was about $70 New Zealand. So less than the cost of the parts to try and get this to work. I'll keep looking out for some old bits for this, but that stuff just isn't around. And it's amazing, you can buy these distributors and these carburetors from China. Obviously the quality might be a bit dodgy, but the particular company I was looking at make all sorts of things. It's not just a one-off, and apparently they're not too bad. For an engine like this, where it just needs to run, I'm not going to do anything with it, then I'm sure that would be fine. So I may end up just ordering one of those. So the cost of the distributor, even the cheapest one from China, is what I paid for the whole engine. But I can easily remake the shaft that goes down the middle and drop one of those on there, and that will give me the advance, the mechanical advance as well. So that's an option. I was going to say something about distributors and it's completely gone out of my mind. But yeah, that may be an option, I think. That's right. I did look up what revs this engine normally runs at. Obviously with a generator on it, it would depend a little bit on the load, but because it's running a generator, it's effectively set up to run at a fairly fixed speed, and it's 1500 RPM. So that's what it needs to run at. So I did look up sort of typical advance curves. I can't remember how many degrees advance that is. It's not a lot. That you'd normally run on an engine like that. And this is going to be a low compression, very low stressed engine. So that's kind of where I'm at with this. It's yeah, it's not going to be so easy to get it going. It amazes me, you watch on YouTube, you find these, they're almost always American films where they find some car that's been sitting in a barn for 30 years and they just chuck some fuel down it and manage to get it going. You know, either parts are so common and so available there that you can just do that, or half of them are faked, I imagine. So it's never quite that easy. But yeah, a 25D I think would fit straight in here. I'm pretty sure these distributor shaft sizes are all the same, all the body sizes where it fits into that little clamp. So maybe I'll do that. Be good to get it running. Amazingly, I found my missing spring. I thought I'll just check my my little trolley here, and it was just down there on that bottom shelf. So that was handy. Like I say, I probably won't need it, but if there was a way to rebuild these diaphragms, I don't know if you could repair this, but maybe if I had the right sort of material, I could laser cut out a new diaphragm for it and rebuild this. But yeah, don't really rate my chances. And even then, these little sealing valves are probably not in very good condition. Although theoretically, one side should have been the sealing side. You can sort of see it there. Maybe if you turn them over, they'll seal better. Hard to know. think I've got this carburetor to work properly. It's cleaned up, it's reassembled. I've got it full of water at the moment, and what I can do is use my vacuum cleaner here to blow some air through it. Yes. And we should see water coming out. Hopefully you can see that. You can see it was definitely spraying the water out. So it's a very simple carburetor. There's no adjustments on it or anything. The only adjustment there was for the throttle, adjusting the idle position and the full open position, and this was way in. So I wasn't getting wide open throttle on it. And until I did that, I wasn't able to get that to work at all. But as soon as I wound this back, so the throttle disc opened fully, it started working. So I think that's good to go back on the engine now. There was no gasket or anything here. It was just a straight seal, but it seems to be how it was. So that's how I'll put it back together. I'm just going to get all the water out of it now. I'll clean it out with some brake cleaner or something like that. But I think that's one part of the puzzle solved. I have the carburetor back on the engine. Everything's bolted up again, and the pipe that goes into the intake from the air filter is in place. I've lubricated up all of the linkages. This is the choke, and this is the throttle. And now that this is all unstuck, you can sort of see how this throttle linkage works. So it moves this rod, which pushes this little arm, which actually moves the little throttle butterfly thing. So when it's in the run position, this is totally disengaged. So it'll just run at whatever throttle position the carburetor is set to. So I don't believe this thing is meant to be run as an adjustable throttle. I believe what would happen is you just move it to the run position, and you just have this set up so that it runs at a fixed rev rate. The manual says that that's 1500 RPM. So that's the fuel side of things, apart from the fuel pump. So I do need to order that fuel pump kit from the UK. I just need to see if there's anything else I want to order at the same time to reduce or make the most of the postage. I've decided I'm not going to clean this at all. Even where it's filthy, I'm just going to leave it how it is. I think it's okay how it is. And that's probably stopping it rusting, and possibly it's holding it together in places. So I probably don't want to fiddle with that. And I may just order one of those 45D. No, it wasn't a 45. Might be a 24. It's like a 25 distributor, but without the vacuum advance, because I don't need vacuum advance. Like I say, 70 bucks from China, it's probably worth a punt. What else can I do with this thing then? So I'll have to order the fuel pump parts. That'll be a plunger. That's the little plunger that runs against the eccentric inside there. I need to figure out what I'm going to do about the stand. I'd like to cut it off this. And I don't know if this is part of the original frame for it. It looks like it is, because it's got that green paint on it. So it might be nice to keep that. Or else this is on its own sort of frame. You can see it's bolted at the front there. So I could make a new square steel tube frame for it and have it sitting lower. I believe, yeah, there'd just be enough room to swing it if it was sitting on the ground on this, but I think you'd mount it on rubber feet or something. Or what I might actually do is make a smaller, lower dolly thing for it. I've got these wheels. These were actually the wheels that for years Joss had the Riley chassis and bits and pieces sitting on a sort of wooden trolley thing, and these were the wheels that were on it. And these seem like pretty good wheels. They're good locking wheels. So I might make up a little trolley with these on it and sit the engine on that, because that's going to get it much lower down to the ground. I don't want it sitting up this high. So the other thing I might do is take off the petrol tank, clean that, and red coat it. I don't like the chrome top. That's completely out of place on an engine like this. I've actually got another thing up here. Boxes and boxes of parts. I'm betting that's exactly the same thing. There we go. So I don't think these are hard to find. I might strip the chrome off this and just paint it black and paint the tank black, or army green, I guess, olive drab. All sorts of bits here. Actually, I could probably move those out into the little parts shed. I did go through my parts shed this morning to have a look at my SU carburetors and see what I had. I've got all sorts of stuff, bits and pieces I've picked up myself, and I bought a box of bits on Trade Me a while ago. Had some useful bits and pieces in it. I have two 1-inch carb bodies, which are the same as used on the Riley, so I'm going to keep those as spares. And then I think I had it was an 1.25 inch, so something like that maybe would work, but I think this will work fine now that I've sort of fixed it up and cleaned it up and fixed the fuel float. Honestly, it's just a very simple Venturi carburetor. The only adjustment on it is on that throttle butterfly position, and that's just for idle and full open, wide open throttle. So what else do I need to do? I did open up the oil bath air filter. Looks like there's clean oil in there, but I might replace that. The engine looked like it had clean oil, but I don't think there's enough. Yeah, you can see the high level is way up there. So it's only half full, or less than half full. So I'll probably drain the oil and redo that. I might open up the filter and just see if I can clean that out. That should be fine. The exhaust, that's just solid. There's not even much soot in it. That should be fine. I don't know if the radiator leaks. I suppose I could fill it up with water and find out. This is broken off. I might see if I can just put a little bit of solder on these just to get these seated again. And I need a fan belt. I keep forgetting about that. I need to measure that up. I'm sure there's a way that you're supposed to measure fan belts. I can put a tape measure around the two pulleys and figure it out from that, I suppose. Spark plugs I've cleaned up, they look fine. And distributor and fuel pump. So I don't see why it wouldn't run. Don't think it's going to run very well, but I'm sure I can get it running. I went and had another look through all of my old Austin 7 parts, because at one point I did buy a modern distributor for that, and I'm sure it would have come with a cap, and it may be the cap that's on the car at the moment, I think. So that distributor wasn't very good. it had so much wobble in it, I don't think it would have worked very well. But in looking through all those bits and pieces, I found a couple of interesting things. I found a nice vintage Lucas 12-volt coil, which takes the little screw-in acorn things. I found a box of these, so I've got a set of these little acorns. I found these actually came with the Riley, the spare Riley I got, a set of ignition leads, and I found a really worn out rotor that fits the distributor. And it occurred to me, so the rotors obviously come handed, depends on which direction the rotor goes, the distributor goes. This is an Austin 7 one, so you can see the little arrow pointing clockwise, but I've mentioned before, Austin 7s, the distributor rotation direction is taken from inside the engine, so the engine is anti-clockwise. So if you imagine that sitting on there, looking from this view, it's going clockwise, but from the engine's point of view, it's going anti-clockwise. So the difference is which way the arm goes out, if it's going to the left or the right. And then it occurred to me, for what I'm doing, it doesn't matter because I've removed the advance. And the only reason I believe you have this long arm like this is to account for that advance. So if you consider that if this distributor was going the way it should be going, that way round, this is rotating round, sending the spark to each of the spark plugs in turn. Say this is where the contact is, it would fire about there. If you advance it, what's happening is this is rotating that way, which is why you need the arm to go off in that clockwise direction. So as this rotates, it's going to hit the contact sooner. But it's basically that. I might have the directions wrong, but that's why you need that extra long arm, because of that advance. So that needs to be able to send the spark over an arc. So this is really worn out, but I'm wondering if I can build that up with a little bit of TIG bronze. Just really carefully add to that and file it smooth, and I think that'll work. But the good thing is this coil works. The camera won't pick up every single spark because of the way the shutter works. But that coil should work pretty nicely on this engine, I think. So it'd be nice to use that. One of the reasons you see with coil ignition cars that you shouldn't leave them, you shouldn't leave the ignition on without the engine running. And the reason for that is because on the distributor, the points are normally closed. So the spark happens when the points open. But on this, you can see for most of the rotation, you can't see, most of the rotation, the points are closed. Anytime the points are closed, there's current going through the coil. So the coil could overheat. So that's drawing power now. And you can maybe hear it's as the points open, the coil sparks. So that's why they often say with older cars, don't leave it with the ignition on and the engine not running, because you've got power going through everything. Unless this just happens to be stopped on the peak, I guess, when the points are open, but that's unlikely. So again, I'm not going to bother cleaning this up. I think I can just use it as it is. I might clean up the wires though, just to get any dirt off them so they don't leak, electrically leak, that is high voltage leakage. So all I really need is the cap now. I couldn't find one in my box of bits. So I did have a look at the one I've got that's all smashed up and broken. It was broken when I got it, I believe. I did consider super gluing it back together, but I don't have all the parts, all the pieces of it, so that's not going to work. I also have the petrol tank sitting in my evaporust. This evaporust is amazing stuff for getting rid of rust on things. It's just the easiest way to do it if you can actually soak the parts, and of course it's perfect for fuel tanks because it can go inside there, but it'll completely remove the rust. This is supposedly worn out. They say when it goes black, it's not going to work anymore, but it seems to keep working for quite a while. So I'm going to leave this in here for a bit. And I was looking at where I could mount it. The coil, I'm just going to give a rub down in oil to stop it rusting. It is a 12-volt coil, it says so on the bottom. The coil, not sure where I can mount that. Anywhere really. Maybe off there, something like that. But that's a nicer period coil than the one I was going to use. Yeah, that's interesting. That sounded like sirens down the road, like police sirens. We get a lot of boy racer types and loud motorcycles and things like that going up and down the street, but I've never seen a cop here. I have still never seen a cop here. It was actually a fire truck. I've just discovered something. This was my old distributor cap, the old broken one, and I was sure I had more distributor bits from when I bought the replica, crappy replica ones, and I did. I found my box of ignition stuff. This was the cap that came on the sort of knockoff distributor, and I remember now it's missing its little carbon brush thing in the middle. But I also had a second one of these, which I have put onto the distributor. The carbon brush on this, that one does have a carbon brush. I did try taking the carbon brush out of this one and putting it into here, but there's nothing to hold the spring, so it just kind of drops out. So I found I had another one already with leads on it and rubber boots, and we hook this up. You may be able to see. It's a bit tricky with one hand, but I can't really do it with one hand, but I am getting sparks there when I turn it over. So I think that's going to work. I'm going to take these leads off. I'll use the older ones. This is kind of a spare set for my Austin 7, I guess. The other thing I have done is, I know I said before I probably couldn't do a compression test, but I thought let's try it anyway, see what sort of compression I can get by hand cranking it. And I was able to get, with a slow crank, 30 psi, but if I really tried to fling it over, I can get up to 40 psi cranking it by hand. I ended up leaving each cylinder for between 20 and 30 minutes to see if they leaked down, and none of them did, so I'm pretty sure this has got good compression. Can release that one. That one's been sitting there for 50 minutes and it hadn't leaked at all. So if I remove this, so in here I've got some more of these acorn things and the little brass discs that you need to solder them to, which is good. I need those. I think it was a universal sort of ignition kit I got, so it came with all sorts of bits and pieces. I need to check the bottom of this box in case the missing carbon brush is in there, but I'm pretty sure that went missing pretty early on, which is probably one of the reasons why I didn't end up using it on my Austin 7. But we hook the earth up again. Should be a bit easier to turn over without any compression meter in there. I'm never sure how close I can focus with this camera, and it's a bit hard to see on the screen. So I think that's spark taken care of. I will need to turn this, disconnect that. There is a timing mark. There's the timing mark. I might put a little bit of white paint on that. I loosen this. Should be a point where so that's sparking about there. Very weak spark. I'm getting all four. So yeah, it's going to be a matter of playing with the timing. I'll use the light bulb trick and be able to statically time this to make sure it's well after top dead center. Get it right this time. Because you want it so that it fires on the downstroke, because you have to hand crank it. If you have it advanced and the piston's coming up and you're hand cranking it and it fires before the piston's at the top, it can fire backwards, and this can then kick back, which is why the instructions, well, for hand cranking anything, are you don't wrap your thumb around it, because that'll break your thumb if it kicks that way, backwards. So you hold it like that, and then if this does go, it's going to rip it out of your hand without breaking any of your fingers. But I'm really pleased with that. I knew I had some of those somewhere, and it looks like I've got a set here that will work. I'm going to put the other leads on it, instead of the rubber boot ones, I'll use the old-fashioned brass terminal ones. And so that's really now the only thing I need is the fuel pump, so I might as well just order that rebuild kit. See if we can get that going. Change the oil and see if I can fire it up, I suppose.